All right, welcome. It is Thursday, May 1st, and you are at Derailed as part of Third Rail Thursday. Man, it's a dreary day. I am in the basement, in this dungeon down here, and it is raining outside, and so it definitely feels like sort of a crafting kind of night. Anyway, I hope everyone's doing well. I expected a stronger May than this, but here we are. Tonight, I am going to return to working on the retaining walls on the layout. I think that is something that I'll be poking away at for the next couple months. And I'm actually really excited to be doing that. And so tonight I want to talk about working a bit with styrofoam, putting some little paper embellishments on my walls, some texturing, and using deadly chemicals to get some pretty cool, or hopefully some pretty cool effects. I should say hello to some people here. I realized that the chat started chatting about in the middle of the day. I'm pretty sure that, I can't even go back that far in the chat to realize who started it, but definitely M Rails and Brian Ferguson were some of the first people to jump in there. So just really quickly, Dunjas Junction, good evening. Brian Ferguson, Trackside Mike, BN Ironwood, Todd Armstrong, Curly Express, I said M Rails, John Train, BN Ironwood, I got that already. Good old RDGK1SE3019. Good evening. Glenn Power Williams, Pat Smith, Pine Valley Railway, Approach Medium, Off the Mainline Trains, Norman Rao, Johnny Knoxville, go Johnny, and Kraus Rails. That's who I've got in there right now. So, one of the things that I had talked about at the last update video was that I was building retaining walls around the layout. And I was able to make quite a bit of progress. And the retaining walls are these. And so they're actually a pretty straightforward build. But what it represents is that on my layout, there's two areas. The one section is just here. The other one's off camera over there. And at the deepest, they're 4 feet deep. And that's beyond my reach. The layout is tall. I can't get back there. But I preemptively had decided that what I was going to do is make the scenery removable from that section of layout so I could literally bring it back to the workbench. And so what I have is a series of 16-inch wide retaining walls. And so there's a city that sits atop this. They're about 110 or 10 or 11 centimeters deep, and they're very straightforward. They're just made out of XPS foam and some 1.5 millimeter laser cut plywood. And I'm fortunate enough that I have a laser cutter. I am fortunate enough that I have a laser cutter and that I understand how to utilize it. And so they have these 12-inch square, 14-inch square birch plywood sheets, and they're really quite affordable. And so I cut these out and then just literally glue them to a styrofoam block to make these archways and retaining walls. And the construction of the walls themselves is pretty primitive. They're measured out. I actually cut the foam on the bandsaw so that I could get some regular widths. A hot wire cutter would have been tidier, but it worked out pretty well. And then actually one of the things is that I used some weld bond to put it together, and then I hammered toothpicks in like nails. And so these are incredibly lightweight, and they repeat perfectly. So because the laser cutting is very accurate, I basically glue these onto the front and then cut the foam to match. So the way that these look right now is good, and I had always intended on weathering them, and I just sort of lost track of how I was going to do that, and by complete chance, I accidentally spilled some super glue on the face of the foam, and it melted it. And I was reminded that that was something that I had been doing a lot more on the last layout, and I sort of got away from it. And so tonight, as I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a few embellishments to the face of these, and then I'm going to go over a few techniques to hopefully rough these up. I'm going to do it on the fly, and so I may ruin one of these, and so be it. But we're going to look at texturing it, melting it, adding some rebar in preparation for painting them. I'm not going to be able to paint them tonight because I haven't decided how I'm going to do that, and because I have about 18 feet of retaining wall, I want to get some sort of technique down that I can use and repeat myself over and over and over again. So, first things first, let's switch cameras here and see if we can't see what's going on. And so this is fairly plain. Now, this is the instance here I was talking about that I melted this. And so what it is, I have a single layer of the plywood first, and then I just put some very straightforward sort of uprights onto them. And what I want to do is I want to build this out a little bit more. And I'm just going to be using some actually laser cut Bristol board that I picked up at the dollar store. It's very thin, and it'll just add enough dimension that when I actually paint and weather this, it will hopefully look a bit better. And so the idea is to add these little pieces, which I've done in black so we can see them, and glue them on. So there's just a few extra little details, and we'll see how long before I don't like doing that. But we'll add some of these on, and so hopefully when I get to the point that I'm adding the paint and weathering these, it'll just give enough for the paint to catch, to do some highlights and just make these a little more interesting. So for this, I am just going to be using a little bit of white glue and a brush, basically to get these all put on. I use an awful lot of super glue, but when you're going to be working as thin as I am here, I don't think it really matters. The white glue will dry almost instantaneously because I'm putting it on so thin. And nothing special, just regular white glue. And then in addition to that, we'll get to using goof off. And this will effectively ruin everything that it touches. So it's the opposite of the Midas touch, and we'll be using that with a great deal of restraint. So in terms of what I wanted to do with this, I want to, as I said, build up some of this area here. And so I have a couple different little pieces that I'm going to include just to give this a bit of visual weight. The other thing is I want to try to hide as many seams as I can. And so there's a seam right here between the cross piece and the upright. And I want to use just a little bit of the Bristol board to just sort of cover that and mask it. Like that. Let's see. And that will just give a little more dimension when it comes to painting. I want to build up pretty thin layers. Originally I was thinking about cutting this out of the actual same plywood, and it's too clunky. I was having a discussion with Kris over at Go Via or Go Home, and sometimes it's pretty challenging for me to switch back and forth between sort of the native HO scale and N scale, and meaning that when you take a look at something, you can automatically tell how many square feet that is in terms of proportion, and oftentimes I'll flip between the two, and so what I think looks good is actually great for HO scale isn't going to work quite as well here. So the design I tried to come up with is I've just got two overlapping, we'll call it like sconce pieces, to give that just a little more visual weight. And I also want to build up the archway here. And again, I'm just using like hardly any white glue at all. And once we go far enough into dressing this up, then we'll turn around and we'll start wrecking it, which is actually what I'm looking forward to tonight. It's sort of a reward system here where so long as I can get a few of these done up with these additional details, I get to reward myself with turning around and wrecking it. So again, hopefully when this gets painted gray, it's ridiculous looking now, this will have just enough of an edge to it that it'll look like a little more detailed and a little more interesting to the eye. I went back and forth in trying to represent what the Toronto area is, and downtown Toronto is actually really well known for what they would call brutalist architecture. And so when I take a look around the world at some of the beautiful train stations there are, that's not necessarily Toronto. Brutalist architecture is basically the art of pouring concrete into a form. And Southwestern Ontario and Toronto is rife with it. It's one of our favorite, or was our favorite, architectural periods. And so the retaining walls and such around the Toronto area aren't near as interesting as a lot of the more historic cities throughout the United States. And so the archways and stuff aren't typical for Toronto, but I added them because I wanted a little more variety and something to look at. Again, the layout isn't necessarily going to be 100% Toronto. It's the starting point for it, and then I take the liberties that I'd like to take with it. Norman Rowe, yeah, we're here for the wrecking. Oh, don't worry, we're going to be just pouring toxic chemicals all over everything. Hopefully get into some, as I said, rebar and wrecked ruined sort of concrete. So there's two of those little guys done. And then the tough one is that I've got another little detail that just goes along the very top of this here. And so one of the things that I found was that when I was building these retaining walls, I treated it a lot like exercise, basically. I just set up a routine where I would try to bang out one of these every night for a few weeks to the best of my ability, and by the end of the month it turned out that I'd completed almost the entire city. And so I want to take a very similar approach when it comes to doing these extra details in the weathering. So basically try to sit down, put the details on, and then start tearing them up. Now I've also got, that's effectively as much as I was going to do across the top. So I've got these two pieces on the uprights that sort of make it like a sconce, and then I've got just a top detail that's running horizontally. And then I'm going to echo that along the bottom with what you probably would call a baseboard, which is this. And I'm not sure if it's visible, but I put little holes in this, little drainage holes, and apparently there's a word for this. They're like scullions or something like that. I forget what it was. But it means now that I get to have, dirty water drips and stuff coming out along the bottom. Now I'm going to have to make some changes to this one because I've got this sort of wrecked concrete here. I'll see if I can't get the angle better. So this was an accidental melt out. And so I probably should have started with something a little more straightforward. But I'm going to try to work this in around what's here. And so we'll just sort of, just mark with the marker that I can't see the color of. Something like that. Again, this is, everything I'm doing here tonight is just in concept, so if I screw one of these up, so be it. That's what we're doing tonight. Might need just a bit of super glue on that one. Okay, and then this other one, I guess I have to tear it back about there. And I'll be able to go at this once it's dry a little bit more. In fact, maybe I should probably just do that. I'll do a little more fussing with super glue when it's done, but you can see that the concrete's broken out there, and so I've broken up this sort of detail across the bottom to try to capture that same thing. And then I've got two more details along the bottom here that I can add in. I finally pick these details up. So the nice thing about the laser cutter is it's sort of a set it and forget it deal. And so I had the opportunity to set it up this morning and let it go. And what I have is this tidy little pile of little paper bits that I can use to dress up the retaining wall. Okay, I'm not so hot on how those are working, but for the time being, call that good there. So I think what I'm going to try to do for the purpose of tonight is get 3 of these dressed up with the paper details, and then get to reckon time and handle it. Where's one of these curved archways? Good evening, Steve 87th. Nice to see you. All right, so I've got the second archway in. Oh, and I messed that one up right there. So let's try to get, maybe I'll add one of the little railings in. And I don't want to go super heavy on the glue. If anything, I want to be pretty spare because I know it will show up with the paint. I've done that enough that it'll add texture that I maybe do or do not want. I've already done a bit of a test paint scheme on this, and that's back when I was working on some of the passenger platforms and I was doing that painting. I was lucky enough that I had some of the preliminary laser cut pieces, and I did a lot of sponge painting, layers of sponge painting. And since that time I've gone back and added an ink wash, and it's turned out really nicely. So to get that sort of weathered concrete look. Really what I'm looking for here is I just want to get a production line going. Okay. And I think what I'll do is I'll just add on these last few here. It's coming along pretty well. Try to scooch this along in between the legs of the tripod. I had been using weld bond when I built my scenery, and I'm out of it, which is perfectly fine. I need to get more. But there is a noticeable difference between it and just regular white glue when working with styrofoam. I know that styrofoam is a is sort of like a staple in the tabletop wargaming communities, and they use a lot of it. And they like white glue. I don't find it's as tacky and work quite as well, so I'm not happy with it. Okay, so pretty good there. So just finish up this last one, and then I'll call that good. And one of the, I don't know if it's totally obvious here, but this doesn't get covered because the next block in the series, which is this one, has an overlapping edge here, which then covers that up. So these interlock sort of like vinyl flooring or something like that, so that when they're all set up across the back of the layout, they're freestanding, they're totally loose. They're not locked per se, but the seams are disguised by the uprights. Am I reading there in the chat? It's 2-1 Toronto. I realize I'm competing with the Leafs this evening, so I appreciate you guys. What's the joke about spring? You know spring is here because the leaves are out? Okay. So that's, well, I probably should do the top. And the last little strip goes on. So what was that? Was that like 10 minutes it took to put that together? So that's what I can sort of expect when I get into the assembly line of doing this. Okay, so you can see for those first 3 panels then, I've just dressed it up. The black is distracting, but what it's going to do is it's going to just give it a little more character, so it does look like the sort of poured concrete that is so typical for this part of the world. That'll take a few seconds to dry. So what I want to do in the meantime is get into Reckon time and talk specifically about Goof Off. Let me get this spun around then. And I'm going to do a little bit of work on the back. Actually, I'm going to get the other one and do a bit of testing on the back. So I think I have to be responsible and say that the Goof Off, which is great for taking tar and gum out of everything, glues, asphalt, all those sorts of stuff. I think the active ingredient in this is xylene, which is, quite frankly, horrendous. You used to be able to buy in art stores xylene markers, just clear xylene, and you could just use it. Xylene's so powerful that what you can do is that you could take a photocopied piece of paper and you can put it photocopied side down onto another sheet. You can take a bit of this or xylene, wipe it on the back with a tissue, rub it, and pull it up, and the entire photocopy will transfer onto the surface. So it's an easy way to transfer, let's say, a photocopy onto a piece of plywood if you were carving. This will actually release the photocopy material. Okay, so let's see. This is really, really overexposed here, but I'll try to make this work. Let's see if I can just do a little bit with the lighting. Is that a bit better for you guys? Well, we'll try to get this going. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to move this out for right now. All right, so I'm going to put a bit of xylene in the cup right now, or Goof Off. I think I got a couple little plastic cups here that I can use. And I'm going to put a little bit in here. It also evaporates pretty quickly. And I've got a paintbrush that I'm not in love with at all that I'm going to use for this. And I'm just going to take a little bit of xylene on the brush, and I'm just going to paint a little circle here for you guys to see. And let's see if I can get the angle right. I think you can start to see now that is just slowly eating away at the foam. Now, this is no different than the reaction you would have with, let's say, spray paint, or certainly as I discovered with some of the super glues, but it will just very, very calmly erode into the foam. And the point is, if I add a little bit more to that same spot, it'll start to take off. It's so powerful that the bottom of this little cup that I'm using is actually gummy. Like it's eating through the cup. It'll take all the ink off my cutting board here. And so there, I think you can see that there, all it's doing is eating right through. Johnny Knoxville, yeah, so basically this is full of danger. Goof-off products generally contain a mix of solvents like acetone, xylene, ethylbenzene, along with other chemicals like methyl acetate, methanol, and something called Stoddard solvent. Yeah, so nothing good about that at all. So one of the things that I have found, so that is sort of really decent cratering, and that is going to add quite a bit of texture to a spot that I want to make it look like crumbled plywood. One of the things that I've sort of learned in the past, though, is that beside this, if I want to just take an X-Acto knife and run a score just like that down the foam, let's see if you can see that line, right? It's just right there, hard to see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with the goof off and I'm going to flood right up to that line. What'll happen is that it'll eat away up to the point of the line, but it won't go past it. So you're able to sort of control it by digging little trenches, sort of like maybe controlling fire or whatever. You're building a little ditch, and so the solvent isn't going to necessarily pass that line. It'll also open it up a little bit. And so I'm going to flip around and do that to the other side in a second. So this is sort of like the heavy hitting distressing that I want to try to add to the other side. Now, along with that, what I want to do is a sort of another technique that, again, is really popular in other circles, and that is to texturize the foam with a crumple ball of tinfoil. So you know that if you try to keep foam perfect, it is very tender and you can mark it really easily. And so just a regular crumpled ball of styrofoam becomes a really nice texturing tool. So in the case of these walls, I had to do quite a bit of research into how concrete crumbles, which sounds less intuitive than it is. But generally, the concrete's going to erode and disintegrate towards the bottom of the walls, as opposed to up under these archways, because that's where the water and the moisture and the snow is going to sit. And so these walls are going to start to break out at the bottom. And so that's what I want to try to simulate. And so what you can do with the tinfoil ball is add a little bit of texture to the wall themselves. And again, I'm going to try to make sure this is seen. So picture this just sort of like a rock, and I'm just going to move it around with quite a bit of pressure to it and go across here, particularly sort of rounding the bottoms. And hopefully you can start to see, yeah, that's pretty good right there. You can see how it's distressing and adding sort of dimples and such, but it's random. So it actually feels a lot more realistic than, let's say, trying to poke it in with a paintbrush or something like that. We don't want you croaking on the live. Oh, I'm way too tough for that. I do have a gas mask. So, in all seriousness, I think I mentioned in the last live stream, I have a super glue allergy, which is not uncommon. And so I use a very thin super glue, very, very thin. And that way you can sort of drown things. And then I have minor respiratory distress the next day. So for tonight, I'm not using any super glue. And I typically haven't had any problems with this stuff, but definitely when I get into the swing of doing this over the course of a couple weeks as I'm working on it, I will definitely be wearing my mask. All right, so that's the testing on the back done. Let's see if I can catch an angle. It's not great to see, but you can see that this is the puddle itself, looks an awful lot like a pothole. The one where I did the slash, the line has kept it at bay, and then you've got the texture across the bottom where the little rolled ball of aluminum has been. And probably the last thing that I want to try to integrate into this is the idea of some rebar. And I have some aluminum screen from a screen door on this house that I'm pretty confident someone went through. We fell into whatever, and so I rolled it up and I've kept it. And I have a lifetime supply of this, but it is aluminum versus the plastic. And I'm going to try now to also insert that into the wall to make it look like exposed rebars. And maybe before I do it to the good side, I'll do it to the bad side. And so I was thinking about this a lot to try to figure out how I wanted to do it. Let's move that out of the way. And so what I think I'm going to do, bear with me here, this is an experiment, is that I'm going to get a little piece of this cut out. Okay, so there's my little piece of, foamy rebar just put on top there. And what I was thinking would work really well is I'm just going to really quickly trace around that with the X-Acto knife so that I can burn out, so to speak, with the Goo Gone where it is. So I'm just going to really quickly trace that. Okay, so there's a 1/4 inch deep score line along there. The Goo Gone has actually gone through the bottom of this cup. It actually is sticking to the desk, so that wasn't the right choice. So what I should really be doing is finishing my drink and putting the Goo Gone in that, but I'm not going to. What I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to dribble a little bit onto the end of the paintbrush outside of the camera view, and we'll do it that way. I should have used a ceramic or glass cup, sort of like a beaker. All right, so the spot where the rebar is supposed to go is right here. I'm going to introduce some toxicity and watch that eat away. And interestingly, where I dimpled it, it's really starting to disappear. Right here, that's the section right there. And maybe what I might do is I might hack at it a little bit with the knife. Okay, so that's melting pretty nice now. So I hope you can see it's kept the shape of the little piece of mesh that I traced. And it's going now. She's picking up speed now. Paul Stamps, Finger Lakes Railway. Good evening, Paul. The same thing happened to me last night with acetone in the spray booth. I remember years ago, there was a mosquito repellent called Muscal, and it came in a little clear container with a green cap on it and you put on your hands. And I very distinctly remembering the fact that it used to melt steering wheels. So people would go camping, they'd get out, they put it on and they go to drive, and it would start to gum up and they would literally melt the steering wheel off with that stuff. So yes, it's not the first time I've had this happen. I can actually eating away the foam, yeah. So the test is that I've got the little piece of mesh here, and I'm wondering, can I just sort of like start jamming that into the melting, goopy stuff? And I think the answer is yeah. Try to get the light on this so it looks okay. So it's actually now receding behind it. It's continuing to melt, but the rebar is sort of at the top edge of it. And I'm okay with all of that. What a save. Thanks for the context on that, M&M Rails. What a save. I'm like, no, I thought this is what it would do. I'm just getting a little more texture with this ball. So yeah. Okay. So I think I'm ready to go for the real thing now. And that's actually glued in there now. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's move to wrecking an actual front of a wall. Which is here. Now, I need to consider the fact that I probably want to, okay, let me think about how I want to do this. I think ultimately I don't like this little piece of paper here, so I'm going to pull that off. And what I don't want to have is I don't want the goop to eat in behind these uprights, like right here. And so I'm going to take the knife and score along there, like so. And then I think what I will do is create sort of a tall rebar-y sort of section along the line, the edge there. Yeah. Okay, so if that's, so hear me out here. So I think what I'm going to try to do is put exposed rebar down the side like that. What I'm hoping is that even though this might not be perfect, by the time it's weathered and I add graffiti to it, it really won't matter. So I've traced around that shape of the graffiti. Let's pull that light out a little bit. So I've traced around where the mesh is going to go. I'm going to load this up now with a bit of goog on it. And in fact, I might actually, or goof off, I guess. Maybe just put it right on like this. Just go wild. That's really melting now. So you can see it's really melting. So let me pop in a little bit of rebar. And you know what I might do is I might pull a couple of these wires out just to make it a little more. Okay, so like we'll do it like that. Maybe I'll just pick some of this down too. If you cut a slit into the foam at 1/8 of an inch and put the screen into it and then melted the foam, that would probably give it a more prototypical look. I think you're right. Let me get this. I made a conscious decision to do a section that was hidden behind a building, so if this one doesn't turn out tonight with you guys, no harm, no foul. I don't hate that at all. So I'm just going to also add a little bit of texture to this. But only texture around near the base. Let's pull this back in. I'm okay with this. I think that's too much rebar. I think I would rather have a much smaller section of it. I'll dump some crazy glue into there. Norman Rowe, graffiti and foliage can cover up a multitude of sins. Listen, I buy Woodland Scenics ground foam by the case. We'll put that all over this and it'll be perfectly fine. But I'm not unhappy with the way that looks at all. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I think for this little section here, I can include just another little oddly shaped piece of rebar and just make that go in. If you're looking for prototypical examples of this, of course, this gets incredibly regional. For anyone who could possibly go down to see a Toronto Maple Leafs game, and when you go right downtown and you cross under the Gardiner Expressway near Lakeshore, the uprights and the overpass there are coming apart worse than what I'm doing here. They are in terrible shape, all told. And so if you need prototypical examples of what exposed rebar, rust, and crumbling concrete look like, look no further than downtown Toronto itself. Okay, so I have a little, oh, that doesn't work, I'll go to the other camera. So I have another little shape here. Oh, I still think that's way too big. Okay, I'm gonna keep knocking that down a little bit. Dundas Junction Model Railroad. Denny, what are you using for rebar? This is an old aluminum screen from a screen door. The difference with it, well, so aluminum is the difference. The advantage is that the goof off doesn't melt it. So I think I'm going to try to get that one in there. So I'm just going to let's just go for it. Oh, way too much. Look at it go. I probably also shouldn't be touching this with my bare hands. But that's actually looking pretty gnarly. Like, huh, look at that. I'm putting gas on it now. You know what? And I don't like this. That's coming off. I originally thought these baseboards were cool. I'm not doing them. I don't like them. Okay. And that way I can ruin around the bottom a little bit more. Yeah, I'm much happier with that. I wish the camera angle, or maybe the camera angle is decent enough that you can see that that's pretty wrecked. So I'm really happy with the way that looks. I'm less happy with that one. It's too big. But this is very convincing to me. I want to see if I can't do that again. Another one, maybe put something right about there. Kraus rails, yeah, Gardner's falling apart, like literally falling apart. Oh, thank you, Floyd, I appreciate that. The preview screen that I have for anything I'm working on is about the size of a deck of cards. Okay, so I have sort of a little teardrop shape here that I'm going to put in right about there. And I'm just going to pull, because it is aluminum, these actually, they pull apart. So I can actually yank out. Let me see. Really hard to see. But you can pull out the weave. The plastic stuff, you can't do that. It just melts. Okay, so I have this little sideways teardrop shape. I'm going to try a little different approach this time, and I'm going to just sort of stab around it. So there's the stabby shape. Stabbed it full of holes, and then rather than use a paintbrush, I'm just going to go straight in like that. You can just see it eat it right out like that. And then let's see if I can't just get that sort of like jammed in while it's still a bit wet. Oh, that's a way better technique. Oh, that worked out way better. Ignore my first example. That's a way better way to do it. And then you can, so the little stabby spots, it really sinks in. But when it's not, it sort of looks more like blistered pavement. Huh, okay. So then as a final touch over in this area, I'll give this a little bit of styrofoam balling. I'm not going to do everything. I wish there was a better way to, let me see, does the downlight, here, let's do this. You can see with the harsh lighting how it looks now like it's really coming apart. Huh, it worked. I wasn't 100% sure if that was going to turn out. So I don't like the first one I did, but these other two look great. Like, I'm really pleased. The only part about this that's going to sort of be less realistic is that these uprights aren't going to erode. And I wasn't about to make them out of styrofoam. I need something with some backbone to them, which is the plywood. So, but they look good. All right, let's see here. Paul Stamps finger, like I bet this would work for sidewalk. Oh, totally. I think, and this goes back to the comment I was making at the very beginning about thinking in HO versus thinking in N. This is so aggressive. It's like O scale, I think this would be 10 out of 10, like prototypical crumbling concrete. HO scale, pretty passable. This is sort of like meteor strike for N scale. So this is pretty aggressive, but because it's going to be on a retaining wall, and I'll try to add, I'll stain it up, I'll add foliage, and I'll add graffiti to it. I think it's the perfect compromise for me. But certainly with larger scales, this would be outstanding. All right, let's do one more. So where do I want to put it? I'm going to try to do one on this panel here. I don't want to make it too obvious. Maybe what I'll do is I'll sort of extend this like that way. So let me grab a bit of screen here. Right, like I'll put it up in, like something up in here, but not too much. So it's crumbling on both sides, let's say. So I'll just kind of, yeah, let's do, yeah, like a little right angle triangle. Actually, that'll improve that a lot. Okay, and then I'll yank out some of the wires so that it looks a little more random. And then the way that we did that the last time is I put it in its place, and then I'm going to stab it with the tweezers. to get the shape of where I want to, like that. And I can't forget to run the knife so that it doesn't go underneath. Okay, let's give this, let's go for it. Away it goes. Norman Road. Denny, how old is this structure supposed to be? Well, it's a good question. I mean, in terms of build, the best I can say is that this probably would have been theoretically made in the 70s for the architectural style. I'm accelerating the weathering so that it looks like it could be 100 years into the future, let's say. I want to be really aggressive with it and make it highly neglected. Yeah, that one's better. That's way better. Norman, yeah, quite old then. I want this, you know, it's fitting with the sort of the theme of the railroad, which is sort of its, you know, I want to run trains of any era because I like them. You know, I don't want to sound too comical when I talk about that sort of apocalyptic thing, but it's trapped in time and it's aged. Let's add a little more of the death sauce here. And then get that in. Yeah, that's way better. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Even that little bit of stabbing made that look a little more realistic. So what I'm thinking I would need to do with this now is that I need to let this dry. I will probably add a little bit of gel super glue to get these screens 100% set. I'm hoping, let's see if I can't get, but you can see how absolutely terrible that looks. And that's exactly what I want to see across the back of the layout. So I'll post some pictures later. So this is probably going to be 4 feet away from the viewer at all times. There's going to be layout in front of it, and this platform at the top is specifically 110 millimeters or 11 centimeters wide, because what happens is that I need 50 millimeters or 5 centimeters for an N scale roadway with 2 sidewalks, and that gives me roughly between 40 and 60 millimeters at the back. And that's the width of or the depth of a standard N scale kit, so I can just put buildings all along the back. So I've got 4.5 inches of elevation, I've got a full sidewalk in here, and then I've got all the buildings along the back. This will be vines and weathered and graffiti, and so hopefully that gives it a ton of texture. But the benefit, as I sort of started out, is that I can do this all at the table. And so I can get sort of fussy with paints and weathering and do it comfortably like this, and then just put it back on the layout like hanging a picture on the wall. Let's see, do I want to do... I didn't bother putting this over here. Need a rat peeking out from the bigger hole. Looks like the tunnel by the Rogers Centre at the Scotiabank. Okay, so we're not trying to hate on Toronto that bad, but there is some serious infrastructure problems downtown. Definitely, I think what we'd say is there's some opportunities for improvement down there. So I'm not sure if, so in terms of distressing this, I don't think I want to go any further on this one. I don't want to make it overboard. I want there to be areas that are bad, but not every single piece needs to be messed up like that. So I think for this one, I'm going to pause and I'm going to put on the layout and I'm going to look at it over the course of the weekend. If I feel like it was too severe, so be it. It's not the end of the world. But I need to let this digest because it's thrilling to watch this eat away at the foam and make these great shapes. But I just need to be mindful that, you know, in terms of scale, because I'm not sure, there's not a lot of N scalers in the crowd here tonight, so I appreciate you. This exposed rebar is roughly 35 millimeters high, which means the exposed concrete is 15 scale feet. So like half the width of the house, or half the height of my house, is exposed rebar. So that's probably ridiculous. That is ridiculous. That's way too much. But for the sake of this, it'll be perfectly fine. I think that, yeah, so what I'll do is I'll start putting these back up and dealing with them and slowly take a look at them. The ones along the back wall I'm pretty loosey-goosey about. I do have if you've seen, I do have the portals that go underneath the city. I want to be a lot more realistic and restrained along there because that is a feature part of the layout. This is sort of like backdrop zone, and so it's okay if I haven't got that completely sorted out, but definitely parts to the front of the layout, I want to be a little more controlled than this. But overall, I'm totally thrilled that this is going to work. I'm going to close that. The cup of Goo Gone is now 100% stuck to the plywood tabletop here. Let's see what's going on down here in the chat. You got exposed rebar, you need me to fix it? Full size. How big is this area, James? I'm not sure what the conversation's going about. Yeah. It is quite crumbling. I go back and forth a little bit, but getting confused about different parts of scale. When I've been using Google Maps and taking a look at different parts of downtown Toronto, there's a corridor where the trains come into Union Station, and it's at the base of the Rogers Centre and the CN Tower. And the alleyway that the 12 lanes or 13 lines of rail traffic come in must be 30 feet below the grade. And so there are hotels that sort of arch out over top of it, and there's skywalks and such. And you don't realize how big and deep and broad these areas are. In the same way that the size of a locomotive will surprise you, the same thing goes for the sheer mass of the infrastructure down there. Yeah. I didn't expect that to turn out as good as it did, so yay me. Let's see. Anyway, with that, I am still continuing working on these panels. I've got them done all the way up to basically my head here, where there is a minor replica or a future replica of a bridge that I'm going to be building. And I'm going to deviate from the actual architectural style that you can find in Toronto, and I'm going to do something a little more freelance because I want it to be a little more imposing and scary. It's definitely still going to use the girder work that I used for Bathurst Bridge, but the uprights and the piers are going to be a little more aggressive. I think a combination of concrete and steel. And then, again, behind my head, I need to manufacture about 4 more of these, not necessarily with this same architectural style, something a little bit different, and that's going to represent some retaining walls that are in West Harbour Station in Hamilton, or at least inspired by that area. And with that, then I will have the entire second level, the elevation, installed. I did build and did finish the majority of the mountains up there. I need to get 1 more sheet of styrofoam in order to build it up completely. And I have a platform that is roughly 5 feet by 2 feet, And the next thing is to bring it back to this table and split it into sections about 16 inches wide, but they'll be 2 feet deep. And again, that'll be entire urban, like city block, so to speak, that I can just pick off the layout and come back to the workbench. And I can turn into completed scenes and then lift them back, because I cannot reach any of the areas up there. Norman Rowe, you have to exaggerate modeling in N scale, otherwise it's so small no one would see it. 100%. It's a real. I have enjoyed it a lot. I have mentioned before. I mean, when I was a kid, I started out much younger. I had HO because everyone did, and the principal reason I migrated to N scale wasn't so much because I thought that I could duplicate sort of the detail that you can get out of HO, because humbly I don't think it's not something I want to chase. I don't want to chase trying to get the same level of detail you can get in the larger scales into the smaller scales. I want to treat it a little more like the view from here, so that when you stand back and you can see 5 feet of city, it's the sum of the parts. If you want to get in there and start fussing, like, oh my goodness, that hand railing is like a 1 foot pipe, and the cracks in the sidewalks are literally a foot deep. And that exaggeration, I think, becomes a bit of a caricature, but I do like the broader city scene. I like the broader look of it, and so being less realistic in pursuit of, excuse me, in pursuit of chasing the mood suits me fine. I mean, don't get me wrong. I sometimes look at it and go, man, is that going to pass? But I appreciate your comment, because it's true. You sit and you look at it and you say, yeah, that's fairly convincing to me. I'm going to give myself a hand here so I can actually see these comments. Pat Smith, I like N scale for so many reasons, mainly because I feel like you get more railroad for your dollar. Harder work with due to the size, but it's worth it in the end. And I think, yeah, that goes back to the comment of it's the sum of the parts. When you walk in and you see literally 2 blocks of city in a 5 foot space, it's a very different experience. I was watching some wonderful unboxings over the last couple of weeks of some HO scale equipment, and don't get me wrong, it's phenomenal. It's amazing, something to look at, and certainly the N scale stuff. It's come a long way. I have equipment up here that's like 40 years old, and there's definitely a difference, but those differences tend to fade, or at least I find they fade as soon as you get 5 feet back, and so that's why. Sometimes I'm not quite so worried about getting brand new equipment that is hyper detailed, because I'm just never going to be in that close. I finished up my new little handheld throttles. I like to stand 5 feet back and watch the trains run. That's why I like passenger trains. Anyway, it's just after 9 o'clock. I'm not sure if you guys have any sort of questions out there, but the plan for me before my next sort of regular update is that I am hoping to attack the fascia, maybe even this weekend, and get that all installed so that I can get all of the block switches mounted on the fascia. I am looking forward to decorating the fascia a little bit. I have access to a Cricut cutter. My work bought one, and I'm welcome to bring it home and use it, and so I might be able to use that to do something special on the face. And I have picked up a fairly good collection of different sort of signs and stuff that I like to apply to it. So I am hopeful that this weekend I'll be able to get the fascia installed and start thinking about finishing the wiring. Aside from that, I'm going to continue to plod along with building up the second elevations and I'd like to start the bridges. Ultimately, the way that I'm approaching this is I'm sort of denying myself a lot of the fun of structures and weathering and scenery to make sure that I've got the foundational elements in. And so I've been treating it a little bit like a chore, which is to say I need to get that mountain, and I need to get that hill, and I need to get these roads, and I need to get these bridges in. And so at least if I came down, I have a sense of where all of the major infrastructure is. The city's there, the bridge is there. I deeply appreciate people who maybe approach their layout very differently, where they've got a beautifully scenic section that sort of tapers off into plywood central. I have a tough time feeling comfortable with that. I want to have everything sort of elevating the level that they exist at the same rate and scale, so that the whole thing over time just continues to layer and age before your eyes, instead of having a completed section and an incomplete section. But definitely I'll be building city structures as soon as the weather starts to cool off, hopefully before that. And I have been looking at maybe doing some really primitive signaling on this. Really primitive. Let's see what else is going on here in terms of discussion. You should try to come to the N Scale weekend in Altoona. Can you print overpasses? Want to see more detail on the foam that you started. Would you like some more close-ups of it, James? Is that what we're asking? Here, hang on. Let's see if I can't get this right up in your face. So, I'm working backwards here. So I know it looks black, but that's all the rebar sort of sticking out. I will, where my fingers are here, over here, that's overdone. That's a bit much. However, no one will ever know. If I can live with it, you can live with it too. Sweden is still on Earth. LGRTLPS. Trackside might look straight. Thank you very much. You know what? Again, this is sort of, this approach to things is certainly not original to me. There is a really deep wealth of information that you can glean from the tabletop wargame people. Styrofoam is their medium of choice. And not that I've seen anyone melt it necessarily, but certainly things like making aluminum texture balls is from that community all the way together. Well, the Leafs game is on. It is roughly 10 after 9, and I think on a rainy Thursday night, I'm going to stop this work here because I could obsessively just keep going on this until there's nothing left. So, again, I appreciate people tuning in with me. This has been fun, and I appreciate the banter back and forth. It has been a great night. I hope everyone is progressing well in the things they're working on. As I said, I should have some more updates available soon because things are going pretty well. So, for everyone out there, thank you very much. Take care, and I'll see you next time.